Right. Good to see everyone this morning. Take your Bible. We're in Joshua 14. I put a table right here in the middle door of a handout if you would like that handout. Maybe you came through the side doors and missed the table, but I'll give you a minute if you want to grab that handout. Or Cliff is walking back there. He'll bring one to you if you want to raise your hand. Anybody need one? One right here. A couple over here. The handout is just a summary of the two chapters we're going to study this morning, 14 and 15. Steve's got some right here. Raise your hand. The handout's just a summary. It's not detailed notes or an outline that I would use for teaching. It's just a summary. So I'm going to start in Joshua 14 and cover 15, and so you have those two chapters in the handout. As I mentioned, it's just a summary of the time that we're looking at time-wise, and we'll talk about some of this, but then we'll turn our attention, read the text, talk about the text. You have characters that are mentioned in the chapters, so whoever is mentioned, you have Joshua, Caleb, Moses in 14, and then you have just Joshua and Caleb in 15. Now Moses is being referenced to, he's dead, but he's being referenced to, so he's mentioned there. And some information here, who they are, and then where they are. So when the characters, so the when, the who, and the where they are as we get into chapter 14. They are camped in Gilgal, and then the back half is just a brief outline, and so you can follow that and take notes as we go. And then I do have at least the second page of chapter 15. There is, as we go along, we will fill in that map, the land that is divided. And the black and white may not, you can look down at Reuben there on the handout and see on the handout here, Reuben, it's kind of really faded, but maybe you can tell the border there. But as we go along and we talk about the chapters and each tribe is given their allotment of land, of course that map will change and we will see how the land is divided up. So from this Sunday forward, so next Sunday and until the end of the quarter, the handout will be right there. As you walk into class, grab it and use it as we study. Joshua 14. So we're in an interesting little situation here where I have a whole quarter, well, maybe a little less than a quarter now. And, oftentimes I struggle to get through a class, in one quarter or two quarters. Sometimes it's a struggle to get through, let's just say Joshua or whatever book in 2 quarters. Sometimes I'm hastily going through the study. But with Joshua, it's almost like a quarter and a half type of material where what I'm trying to say is I think we have plenty of time to teach what we have left, because chapters 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18, and 19, so 14 through 19, you have land division to the tribes. Well, we're not going to read that in its entirety. It's a lot of borders, and you can just look at a map and tell what the chapter's talking about. So really, it's not going to take us a lot of time to talk about chapters 14 through 19, and then that takes us to chapter 20, and then there's only 24 chapters. So my point is we have plenty of time, and I'm going to try to go at a slower pace. Does that make sense? It's usually the opposite, trying to hurry. And I think we'll be studying Joshua right to the very end of this quarter, and then we'll pick up a new quarter study, and I don't know what that'll be yet. But anyway, my point is we got plenty of time. All right, Joshua 14. So let's read the handout really quick. Joshua 14. So when is this? Well, when we get into the chapter, we'll talk more about this, but Israel's conquest of the Promised Land began around 1450. Now, around, not exactly, we don't know for sure, but around, and we can put some major events together, we can piece it together and look at a timeline, and we can guesstimate. So it's around 1450 BC. And lasted approximately 5 to 7 years. Now we're talking about the conquest here. So the beginning of Joshua to the end of Joshua is 5 to 7 years. And we know that based on chapter 14 that we're getting into this morning, and the request from Caleb. Caleb will talk about how old he was when he was sent into the land as a spy. And then he will talk about how old he is currently. So we put these numbers together, basically. We put these numbers together and a timeline, and we see, if they left Egypt at this time, and then they wandered for 40 years here, and then now they've conquered the land of Canaan. And so we see all that, and again, I'm trying not to say what's in the text, and we'll get to it, but 5 to 7 years. And then you have a little note there, using the age of Caleb mentioned in 14 verses 7 through 10, we can conclude that the events of this chapter took place 45 years after Moses sent the 12 spies into Canaan, Numbers 13. So the characters that we have here, we have Joshua, we have Caleb, and Moses. We haven't heard a lot about Caleb in the book of Joshua. I'm sure he's popped up a couple of times, but not a lot. But Joshua and Caleb were the two faithful spies that went into the land of Canaan in Numbers 13. There were 12 spies total. 10 were afraid of the giants, did not believe that they could take the land. So 10 were the pessimists, we would say, and then 2, Joshua and Caleb, were the optimists, and they believed that they could take the land with the help of God. And again, we'll see more of that in the request from Caleb in chapter 14. And then we have Moses being referenced here about how a lot of this land allotment being divided to the tribes it's being done as Moses commanded. Well, really God to Moses, but then Moses, before he died, these were some instructions that Moses gave, and so you have Moses being referenced here. Well, where are they? Well, the location, the Israelites were camped in Gilgal, and you can see that Gilgal is there on the map, if you can read that smaller print there, but there's a question mark where the location is, or where we think it is, because we really don't know. There are some places that we do know for sure. Some of those places still exist. If you were to go to the Bible lands, if you were to go over there to Israel, to Jerusalem, a lot of these places are still there. Some of these mountains and the terrain, the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea and the Jordan, and all that land is still there, and a lot of the places we know of for sure, but there are some places we don't know for sure. But Gilgal is there south, really south on the western side of the Jordan, and that is where the Israelites are camping. And then if you flip to that second page, you have an outline, and we'll follow that as we go through chapter 14. So, beginning chapter 14, you have the land divided to the 12 tribes of Israel, verses 1 through 5. So let's read this together. Chapter 14, verses 1 through 5. You have just a really broad statement here, how the land is being divided. Verse 1, these are the areas which the children of Israel inherited in the land of Canaan, which, now here you have who divided it. Here you have those that gathered and divided the land, which Eleazar the priest Joshua the son of Nun, and the heads of the fathers of the tribes of the children of Israel distributed as an inheritance to them. And so here we have Eleazar the priest, Joshua the son of Nun, or just Joshua, and the head of the fathers, so the heads of each tribe. These are the heads of each tribe. And so the 12 tribes are being represented here, and they're going to divide the land. It's my understanding that they are doing it by lot, meaning that they are going to, in some way, divide the land. They would probably, again, my understanding, they would probably write the land division on stones or something, put them together and draw. Each tribe perhaps would draw, maybe if you're looking at Judah and what land would Judah get, well then they would draw whatever was written and put together, so they would draw and see what land they received. My understanding of how they would do that. But these are who's doing it: Eleazar the priest, Joshua, and the heads of the tribes. Verse 2, their inheritance was by lot, as the Lord had commanded by the hand of Moses. And so there we have our first reference to Moses for the 9 tribes and the half tribe. So let's talk about that for just a moment. Again, 2.5 tribes stayed on the eastern side of the Jordan. And if you look at that map for chapter 15, you see that. You have Gad and Reuben on the eastern side, and then you have half of the tribe of Manasseh. They stayed on the eastern side, and they will inherit that land. And the men of those tribes crossed the Jordan to the western side. They will help fight, and when all of the land is conquered, they will go back, and they will go to their families and to their tribes and to their land, and the men will go back, and those tribes will inherit that eastern side, the rest on the western side. But here you have a reference to those 9 tribes and that half of a tribe of Manasseh. Think about a couple of verses here. So Moses is referenced. Let's go to Numbers. Numbers 26. Just thinking about Moses. Numbers 26. And let's look at verse 55. Numbers 26:55. But the land shall be divided by lot. This is Moses. Well, let's back down to verse 52. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, to these the land shall be divided as an inheritance according to the number of names. To a large tribe you shall give a larger inheritance, and to a small tribe you shall give a smaller inheritance. Each shall be given its inheritance according to those who were numbered of them, but the land shall be divided by lot. They shall inherit according to the names of the tribes of their fathers. And so again, that's what's being referenced here in Joshua 14 when it references back to the Lord commanding Moses, but it's being fulfilled here with Joshua. Numbers 33 also. Numbers 33, verse 54. Again, you have very similar instructions. If we were to back up to verse 50, now the Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho, saying, all right, very similar, dropping down to verse 53, you shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land and dwell in it, for I have given you the land to possess, and you shall, verse 54, shall divide the land by lot as an inheritance among your families. To the larger you shall give a larger inheritance, to the smaller you shall give a smaller inheritance. There everyone's inheritance shall be whatever falls to him by lot. You shall inherit according to the tribes of your fathers. So those two passages in the book of Numbers, just for us to consider, when God told Moses, this is how you will take the land and you will divide it to tribes, each tribe, 12 tribes. And so then we turn back to Joshua 14 and we read a reference to that verse 2, their inheritance was by lot, as the Lord had commanded by the hand of Moses for the 9 tribes and the half tribe. Verse 3, for Moses had given the inheritance of the 2.5 tribes on the other side of the Jordan, the eastern side, but to the Levites he had given no inheritance among them. And so let's talk about, in the next couple of verses, Levi, or the tribe of Levi, and then we'll have a reference to Manasseh and Ephraim being the children of Joseph. All right, verses 3 and 4. So, the very end of verse 3, but to the Levites he had given no inheritance among them, meaning they did not inherit land. They did receive an inheritance, just not land. For the children of Joseph were 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. You know, you read about these tribes and you read about the land division, and you never think, well, there's not a tribe Joseph, which at this point in my Christian life, that sounds weird. Like, there's no tribe Joseph. And even if there were, like, tribe, what would they be? The Josephites? I don't know. But Joseph is represented by 2 other tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim, because that's his 2 sons. Manasseh and Ephraim were adopted, in a sense, by Jacob. And so Joseph is represented here in 2 of his sons and their tribes. And they, verse 4, gave no part to the Levites in the land except cities to dwell in, with their common lands for their livestock and their property. As the Lord had commanded Moses, so the children of Israel did, and they divided the land. So that's verses 1 through 5. Very just big picture, broad statement here that God commanded Moses to divide the land between the tribes. He commanded it to Moses. Moses is now dead, so it's happening with Joshua. But it is happening exactly as God commanded. They are following his instructions. We have an interesting reference here to the Levites and their inheritance. And so they inherited the priesthood. All priests came through the tribe of Levi. Not all Levites were priests, but all priests were Levites. And that's what they inherited. And because they did not inherit land, they were allowed to live in cities among the other tribes. They had common lands where they would keep their livestock, and they basically had the responsibility of representing God among the Israelites, among the people, and they were the priesthood. Now, something else that is an interesting conversation, maybe not today, but another time, just think about it. Something that some people will bring out if you talk about the priesthood and if you talk about Jesus. Something that will come about in that conversation is that Jesus is described as our high priest, but yet he did not come from the tribe of Levi. He came from which tribe? Tribe of Judah. He came from the tribe of Judah, yet in Hebrews chapter 4, 14 through 16, he is described as our high priest who can sympathize with our weaknesses because in every way he was tempted as we are. And so just an interesting point of conversation. Take note, he is now considered and described as our high priest today. We no longer need a physical, earthly priesthood or high priest to be a mediator between us and the Father, which was the responsibility of the priests. They were a mediator between God and the people. and they often offered sacrifices, and it was the high priest who was allowed to go into the Holy of Holies and the tabernacle. And so the priesthood, but that was eliminated and taken away, and now the church is the spiritual tabernacle, and the church, and Jesus is our high priest, but he came through the tribe of Judah. All right, verse 6, I'm excited to get into because this is the request. So verse 6 through 15, the end of the chapter, is Caleb's request. Let's talk about Caleb. He's not talked about a lot in Joshua, but he's brought up here, and I have no doubt that Joshua's leading Israel, but Caleb's been there the whole time. He's been there. I have no doubt he's been in these wars. He's been fighting along the other men. He's been there with Joshua. But here's Caleb. Caleb is going to inherit land because of his faithfulness to God. Because he was faithful, because he was one of the two spies that believed in God and the ability for Israel to take the land when they spied it out in Numbers 13. Because Caleb was faithful, God allowed him to live. All of the others died in the wilderness when they wandered for 40 years. All of that other generation died out. Caleb was allowed, and he lived, and then he was given an inheritance, a land inheritance, because of his faithfulness to God. And so let's read about that beginning in verse 6. Then the children of Judah came to Joshua in Gilgal. So again, going back to that Joshua 14, where are they? The Israelites are camped in Gilgal. And Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know the word which the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, concerning you and me in Kadesh Barnea." And so I like Caleb's reference there to Joshua, the word that the Lord spoke to Moses when you and I, the two faithful spies, were in Kadesh Barnea. Verse 7, I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and I brought back word to him as it was in my heart. So Caleb referencing that he was 40 when he was selected by Moses to go into the land to spy it out. Again, that's Numbers 13, Numbers 14, 15. So that's Numbers 13 when they spied out the land. But Caleb gives us an interesting detail that he was 40 years old when Moses sent him to spy out the land. Now, again, timeline, if we look at a timeline here, from the time that they left Israel, or Egypt, from the time they left Egypt, if I can remember this correctly, to the time that they spied out the land, there was about 2 years. There was about 2 years from leaving Egypt to spying out the land, about 2 years. If we drop down to verse 10, now behold, the Lord has kept me alive, as he said, these 45 years, ever since the Lord spoke this word to Moses, while Israel wandered in the wilderness, and now here I am to this day, 85 years old. So they wandered for 40 years, and Caleb here says that he's now 85. He spied out the land when he was 40, and now he's 85, and that God has kept him alive for 45 years. And so if they wandered for 40 years, and now it's been 45 years, again, that's why we go back to the front of your outline, that it took about 5 to 7 years to conquer this land of Canaan, 5 to 7, because we're given about 2 years from leaving Egypt to spying out the land. That was about 2 years. They wandered for 2 years. And now they're conquering the land of Canaan. 5 to 7 years that it took. But anyway, let's go back to Caleb's request here. Verse 8, nevertheless, my brethren who went up with me made the heart of the people melt. But I wholly followed the Lord my God. So Caleb, again, referencing the 10 unfaithful spies, and then how he believed in God, and he believed it with all of his heart. Notice what he said in verse 7. Notice how he references that he believed in his heart. He won. If I can paraphrase what I think Caleb is saying here, I believe Caleb is saying that in his heart, he wholly, 100% had faith that God would allow them to take this land. So verse 7, I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and I brought back word to him as it was in my heart. I believe what Caleb is saying there is that he believed 100% in his heart. He had faith in God, is what he's saying, that he had faith in God to deliver this land into their hands. And he was faithful to God, and the other spies were not. Verse 8, the other 10 spies, they caused the heart of the people to melt. But I wholly followed the Lord my God. But oftentimes, majority rules. And the 10 spies convinced all of Israel, and because of that, they wandered for 40 years. Verse 9, so Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land where your foot has trodden shall be your inheritance and your children's forever, because you have wholly, notice wholly, not partially, not anything less than 100 wholly percent. He followed the commands of God. The Lord his God. And now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive, as he said, these 45 years, ever since the Lord spoke this word to Moses while Israel wandered in the wilderness. And now, here I am this day, 85 years old. So we have an age here. Now, what's interesting to me is what comes next. So he's talking about how he was faithful to God in his 40s. He believed God when he spied out the land. He still believed God even when the other 10 spies did not. He has remained faithful to God, and because of that, God has blessed Caleb. Now, that reminds me, I need to turn over to a couple of verses and read them. But what is interesting is what follows. He talks about how now he's 85, but that he is still as strong as he was in his 40s. He's still a good soldier. He's still a good fighter. He's still able to do what he was able to do from 40 to 85. But let's put a little pin there, pause. I want to look at a couple of verses that I have noted here. Let's go back to Numbers 14, beginning in verse 21. Numbers 14, 21. So this is after they spied out the land. Beginning in verse 21. But truly, as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, because all these men who have seen my glory and the signs which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have put me to the test now these 10 times, and have not heeded my voice, they certainly shall not see the land which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who rejected me see it. So basically the punishment for the unfaithful and those who followed the unfaithful spies, they will die in the wilderness. They will not see the promised land. Verse 24, but my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him and has wholly followed me, I will bring into the land where he went, and his descendants shall inherit it. And the Amalekites and the Canaanites dwell in the valley. Tomorrow turn and move out into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. So there's our first reference to everyone else will be punished, but Caleb, because of his faithfulness, will inherit land. I mean, imagine that not just for the sake of Caleb, but for his family. Caleb, because of his faithfulness, will inherit Hebron, this land, this city. But because of that, his family will be taken care of. His wife, his children, his children's children, his grandkids, his great-grandkids. Now, because of Caleb's faithfulness, it does not just affect him, but now his family have an inheritance because of his faithfulness. Let's go to Deuteronomy 1, and then we'll go back to Joshua 14. But Deuteronomy 1, verse 35, and we'll just read a little bit here. Deuteronomy 1:35. Let's back up to verse 34. Deuteronomy 1:34, and the Lord heard the sound of your words and was angry. This is a description of Israel's their penalty for their rebellion, and was angry and took an oath, saying, surely not one of these men of this evil generation shall see the good land which I swore to give to their fathers. Verse 36, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he shall see it, and to him and his children I am giving the land on which he walked, because he wholly followed the Lord. Let's read a little bit more. I see Joshua's name here. Verse 37, the Lord was also angry with me for your sake, saying, even you shall not go in there. Joshua the son of Nun, who stands before you, he shall go in there. Encourage him, for he shall cause Israel to inherit it. Well, that's an interesting verse that I didn't read that far earlier, but a prophecy, really, or a prediction that Moses will not even inherit the land, but that Joshua will, to encourage him that they will inherit it with Joshua. All right. Got about 10 or so minutes left. Going back to Joshua 14. So let's finish the request of Caleb here. So basically, Caleb is requesting that Joshua not forget that he is to inherit land because of his faithfulness. So basically, Caleb's request here is, Joshua, don't forget about me and my family and my children and what God promised for us. So let's go to 11. As yet I am also strong to this day, as on the day that Moses sent me. Now, here's what I was referencing. Just as my strength was then, so now is my strength for war, both for going out and for coming in. And I have no doubt he was still a good, strong man, able to fight in war, and perhaps he continued to do so. Verse 12, now therefore, give me this mountain of which the Lord spoke in that day, for you heard in that day how the Anakim, those are the giants, the line of giants that were in the land, that they were driven out, that were there in the land in Numbers chapter 13. You heard in the day how the Anakim were there, and that the cities were great and fortified. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall be able to drive them out, as the Lord said. And Joshua blessed him and gave Hebron to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, as an inheritance. And so he receives Hebron. Is that on the map? I don't know if it is or not. Oh no. The back map? Towards the bottom. Yeah. So if you look at Numbers 14, at that map there where Hebron is located, I do know it's south, so that seems like an accurate location there, that he will inherit, him and his family. What's that? East of the Dead Sea. Okay. Is that even in the text? Is east of the, let's see. Yeah, so it is east of the Dead Sea, but yeah. So notice it there on your map. You can see it there. You can circle it and put Caleb. Just remember that there's his land. Verse 13, and Joshua blessed him and gave Hebron to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, as an inheritance. Hebron, therefore, became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, Kenizzite, to this day, because he wholly followed the Lord God of Israel. And the name of Hebron formerly was Kirjath Arba. And this is interesting. Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim. Arba, so it was named after the greatest giant in the line of the giants. It seems, and what it's saying here, Arba, Kirjath Arba, was the greatest man among the Anakim. Then the land had rested from war. And so that's chapter 14. About 10 or so minutes left. Let's walk through a little bit of chapter 15. That puts us into a good spot for next week, beginning chapter 16. But chapter 15 is pretty lengthy. Our outline here, Joshua 15, when? So again, just, we're looking at, again, that timeline, 5 to 7 years here. The characters, we have Joshua, we have Caleb here again. And I know that in verse 20, we'll have a reference, not verse 20, verse 13, we have a reference or an insight, a little glimpse into Caleb conquering the land of the giant, the Anakim. Where are they? Well, they're still in Gilgal, camping in Gilgal, 14 and verse 6. Joshua 15 describes the land allotted to the tribe of Judah. So the tribe of Judah. And again, we're not going to read all of the territory and the boundaries, but you have a map there on the very back with an outline and a map. You see that large portion of land that Judah will inherit, at least our understanding of the land there. But Joshua 15, verse 1, so this is the lot, so this was the lot of the tribe of the children of Judah according to their families. And so again, you just have massive portions of the text here describing the border of the land. Each verse almost begins with the border. This went up here, the border. Verse 5, the east border was the Salt Sea or the Dead Sea. So we know it went all the way to the Dead Sea as far as the mouth of the Jordan. And so it went up to where the Jordan met the Dead Sea. And the border on the northern quarter began at the bay of the sea of the mouth of the Jordan. And the border went up. And so literally, and I don't know how to say a lot of this. In fact, I got a really good tip. She's not in here this morning, but a couple of weeks ago, because I struggle. I'm not one that can read and just try to pronounce things. First of all, I'm standing in front of y'all, and so my tongue gets tied trying to read some of these words. And even if I can confidently read it in private, but then I get up here and I'm teaching, that's and then I don't know how to say some of these names. They're pretty hard to pronounce. And then some people that think they know how to say it, maybe they say it right, maybe they don't say it right. But anyway, I got a really good tip. Someone 2 weeks ago, I think, told me to listen to the Bible on audio. So you can get the DVDs, or now you can get a phone app that will just read the Bible to you. Listen to the way that people pronounce it when they read it in an audio version of the Bible. And so I was just like, well, hey, that's a pretty genius tip. If I'm studying at home, or if I'm studying for Bible class, listen to it. And listen to some of these names and cities being pronounced by someone else. Anyway, I thought that was a good tip, so I appreciate that. That was Sandy Garner who told me that. She's not in here, but appreciate that tip. Okay, going down to verse 13. So 13 to 19 is really the only thing that we can look in this text that's not a description of the land, the border for the land of Judah. But right in the middle of this, we have Caleb and him conquering the Anakim. So verse 13, now to Caleb the son of Jephunneh he gave a share among the children of Judah. And so I guess Hebron so Hebron is in the midst of Judah, the land, the territory. And so that's why we have it listed here, I guess, Caleb conquering the city of Hebron. But here's the land to Judah, and then here's Caleb, verse 13. According to the commandments of the Lord to Joshua, namely Kirjath Arba, which is Hebron. Arba was the father of Anakim. That's the giants. Verse 14, Caleb drove out the 3 sons of Anak from there. So there you see the 3 sons. Again, just pronouncing them is a little difficult. But you see the 3 sons of the giant Anak, the children of Anak. Then he went up from there to the inhabitants of Debir, formerly the name of Debir was Kirjath Sepher. And Caleb said, he who attacks Kirjath Sepher and takes it, to him I will give his daughter. Caleb will give his daughter as a wife. So Othniel, the son of Kenaz, the brother of Caleb, took it, and he gave him his daughter as a wife. Verse 18, and it was so when she came to him that she persuaded him to ask her father for a field. So she dismounted from her donkey, and Caleb said to her, what do you wish? She answered, give me a blessing, since you have given me land in the south. Give me also springs of water. So he gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. And so just a very small insert there of Caleb taking the Anakim, driving them out, and giving his daughter, seems, verse 16, and Caleb said, he who attacks Kirjath Sepher and takes it, to him I will give my daughter as wife. So then beginning in verse 20 to lots of verses here, verse 63. Verse 63. We have more names, more territories, the cities. Verse 21, the cities at the limits of the tribe of the children of Judah towards the border of Edom in the south were, and you have lots of cities here. I mean, lots and lots and lots of cities. And verse 61, in the wilderness. So then verse 63, as for the Jebusites, the inheritance of Jerusalem, the children of Judah could not drive them out, but the Jebusites dwell with the children of Judah at Jerusalem to this day. So I'm going to end there. That's getting through verse 15, and I feel good about that, getting through those 2 chapters. Any thoughts, questions, comments? I personally feel like getting to chapter 19 is going to be a little tedious, a little bit more so than maybe I'm used to, maybe you as well, just because it's a lot of land division. But I'm going to try to make it as easy to understand as possible. Again, I'll give you these handouts each week, and you'll see that land being divided each week, and try to summarize it as best we can. All right, we got 1 minute left. Questions, comments, thoughts?
There was always some bad people living among them, and I think it was until David and his son Solomon had
Yeah.
the promised land
Yeah. You know, right now I'm not really sure about that. Maybe I'll look into that this week. I don't know. That's a new one for me, but I'll look into that. Maybe so. And I'll have an answer next week. I don't know if you'll be here, but good to see you this morning. All right, it's 9:45. Thanks for being here. You're dismissed.